Well, hello there, everyone. This is a different kind of article react. These are articles that were submitted to me to react to. This specific one is from a friend on the Wacky Writers forum. I'll link that below. It's a writing forum, free to join. It is recommended by user not a Russian bot or NARBY. Thank you for this article. We shall see what exactly this thing is. So, this is a website, Myth Creates. I have no idea. I don't know what this website is. We're just going to dive into it. It's kind of a long article, so I'm hoping to skim through some of it. The title is How to Keep Magic from Ruining the Plot. Putting firm limits on magical powers will prevent countless headaches. This was posted on May 25, 2024, so it's a quite recent. It was last month. The author is named Oren Ashkenazi. Okay, so let's see what Oren has to say. If my voice sounds tired, I just did an hour video before this. Did I take a break? No, only like a few minutes, but I kind of did, sort of, not really. Is there anything more fun than opening a new fantasy novel and exploring its take on magic? From classical wizardry to elemental martial arts, magic is a huge part of speculative fiction's appeal, dazzling audiences with its many wonders. But magic also has the potential to completely ruin a story. Few things are as annoying as a character with the power to solve all their problems, but who doesn't use it because the plot isn't ready yet. Interesting. We've spoken about limiting magic. Oh, you have. A few times over the years. But creating a comprehensive guide is difficult because the number of different magic systems out there is effectively infinite. What works for one may not work for others. Today, it's finally time to climb that particular Everest, starting with everyone's favorite question. How much do you need to think about this? Okay. If you're a nerd of certain proclivities, it may be a surprise that not everyone actually enjoys examining their magic system with the granularity of an environmental impact statement. Okay. Some people don't want to do this for philosophical reasons, such as the belief that magic should be mystical and unknown, not bound by rules like boring old science. For other authors, it's just a lot of work. Even us world-building pedants have finite time, so it pays to know when limits are mandatory and when we can just fudge things. I'm pretty sure I'm the latter when I just fudge things, usually with magic systems. By the way, this is a different kind of article that I've looked at compared to the other articles, because this is not really a how-to particularly. It's more like I'm thinking it's like more like a discussion piece, but we'll see. So it's just be my reaction, maybe my opinions on things, maybe talk about some of my experiences, I'm guessing, how it relates to me as an author and stuff like that. We'll see. I just bumped my mic again. You might have heard that. I have to stop bumping my mic. My gosh. The simple rule is that the more important a piece of magic is to your plot, the more important it is to establish limits. The highest priority will be magic that your protagonist uses. This is where the audience's scrutiny is most intense, and the author's temptation to hand out overpowered magic is highest. A hero with unlimited magic will either solve problems too easily or act as a contrived manner to avoid solving problems too easily. Okay. Yeah. If a hero is too overpowered, I'd be like, oh, it's one of those stories. Just like a convenient plot device, kind of. If you have a too overpowered character and there is no one that can be their match, that would be a problem. Priority moves down the ladder in order of how big a presence each character has in the story. This applies to villains as well as allies. If the hero's mentor can save the day by casting Meebotom's day saving at 9th level, that's a problem, but it's just as bad if the villain has the power to wipe out Team Good with a snap of their fingers. Is that in reference to Thanatos in... What universe is that? It's not X-Men. It's DC. It's DC. Thanatos in DC. Just snap. I thought that was way too overpowered. When I saw that happening, it's like, come on. What? How is this? How are the characters going to defeat that? That's impossible. I guess they eventually do, and then they do like some weird, like, I didn't watch the like last few movies of that DC universe, but was it DC? Wait, Marvel. No, it's Marvel, isn't it? Yes, it's Marvel, right? Is it DC or Marvel? Wait, hold on a moment. DC is Superman and Spider-Man and Batman, right? Marvel is like everyone else, like Captain America, stuff like that. Is that Marvel? Yeah, I think it's Marvel, actually. Tell me if it's Marvel or DC. I think it's Marvel. Thanatos, right? Yeah, when I saw it, and then the last two movies was like they do some like time travel stuff to collect gemstones to like go to the past and like all that. I'm like what is this plot? Where is this going? This is just crazy. Apparently it's good action, but I thought it was kind of a weird kind of plot going on there. Also need to think about magic that isn't attached to individual characters. If there's a healing spring in the center of the city where your fight scene takes place, that's probably a big deal. You'll need to think how much water is in the spring and how long its healing properties last. Otherwise, you'll have grubby little protagonists bottling the stuff and making a fortune. If a character or location doesn't receive much focus in the plot, you don't need to worry as much about setting limits. A distant king's magic can stay vague, as can that same healing spring if your story is about court manners rather than martial arts. Nothing wrong with establishing limits on less important magic too. It won't be a big problem if you don't, because the audience is less likely to think about it. Yeah. So if the person using the magic is in a distant location, then it doesn't need to be established particularly because your audience won't be thinking about it. Like if it's not in the story as much, then your audience won't be thinking about it. Okay. Ways that common limits fail. Authors are a creative bunch, and they've come up with countless ways to limit the character's magic over the years. That said, a few common problems with these limits have emerged. Because they're easy to explain or narratively convenient, these mistakes repeat again and again. Over-reliance on these limits is what gets authors in trouble. Fatigue. Using magic makes you tired. What could be simpler? We all know how fatigue works, so it's also intuitive. And it just feels right. Throwing fireballs should make you tired. Even in stories that don't have any stated limits on magic, fatigue serves as a fallback to keep things from getting too out of hand. I use fatigue in one of my stories. Let's see what they say, and then I'll tell you about mine. The problem is, while fatigue is certainly intuitive, it's not specific. Outside of video games, there's no stamina meter to let readers know how many spells a character can still cast. Just like with physical tasks, being tired could mean that the character is about to collapse. It could mean they'll get a second wind and keep going. In practice, this means authors usually treat fatigue-based magic as if it's always available, the same way a character with a sword always has the option of swinging it. That's fine for stories like Avatar: The Last Airbender, where the magic is meant to be used all the time. It's a problem for stories like the Dresden Files, where simply casting a spell is a common turning point in big conflicts. In those books, Dresden is often in a position where he's tired from casting a bunch of magic, but he'll win the day if he can cast just one more surprising no one he always manages. For fatigue to be an effective limit, characters have to consistently collapse after a spell or two, not whenever it's convenient for the plot. Almost no one has managed to depict it that way. Well, I think I've almost nearly managed to depict it that way. What I'm saying is that I have a story on Wattpad. Some people might know, some people might not. It's called Lone Gold Daring Purple, and the main character is named Cyper. And there is a scene where he is using magic. So basically, he's using teleportation magic. And the thing about him is that he is a young sorcerer learning, and the only thing that he can do with teleportation, he can only teleport depending on how far he can clearly see. More practiced sorcerers can teleport to wherever they remember being. So if they remember being in that specific location and they can recall it clearly, they can teleport to that location. But Cyper can't do that yet. He doesn't have, that's an advanced form of teleportation magic. So he can only teleport to where he can see clearly. And it's not taking into account of what he might actually, where he might actually end up. So he might see some buildings in the distance. He might see that there's an open space. There's some entrance before the city. He might teleport there, but he might not account for, like, if there's a ditch or if there's spikes, like if there's something there that he doesn't notice when he first sees it, he's going to teleport into it and potentially injure himself. So that's a limit. But about the fatigue is that more experienced sorcerers build up their sort of magic muscle, magic stamina over time after using magic many times. So magic is like if you practice an instrument, you don't use it for a while, you kind of forget it. That's kind of like how magic works in my world. And the limit is the fatigue. It's also not practicing enough. So if you don't practice enough, you'll also get more tired easily. Cyper does practice his magic a lot, but he hasn't had much opportunity either. And he is also still a young sorcerer, so he doesn't have much capacity to begin with because he hasn't learned the advanced magic, and so he hasn't been able to practice having more magic muscle, so to speak. So he's teleporting, okay? And he teleports once, and he gets pretty tired because teleportation magic is sort of close to an advanced magic, so it takes a lot out of him. And then the second time he teleports, he doesn't teleport very cleanly, so he kind of brushes through the forest and gets cuts and stuff on his arms. And then the third time, he doesn't get very far at all and falls into a lake. And then he has to actually lay down. Despite that he's being pursued by enemies, he has to kind of hide and lay down to feel energized enough to do one more teleportation spell, but then he doesn't do well and ends up in the mud. So I think, and then after that, he's not able to do magic for quite some time. And I do also do this type of fatigue type of thing with another character, and she's a lion girl. And the thing about lion girls, not the thing about lion girls. What am I trying to say? Bipedal lion creatures is that their magic is fire. So when they swim in the water, it actually sort of, it doesn't really put their magic out, but it kind of makes them not be able to use their magic for a while. Also, if they've been cold for some time, because they live in a warm climate, but if they then go into a cold climate, they're unable to use their magic at all. So it's kind of like fatigue, but not really, I suppose. That's what I do. I don't know. Is that fatigue? I wouldn't say, when it says almost no one has managed to depict it that way, I could say that I have managed to somehow depict it in a way that's not just when it's convenient for the plot. It's very inconvenient for the plot. Because Cyper is escaping from enemies, and Lion Girl is also escaping from enemies. They can't just stop using their magic, but Lion Girl's magic doesn't come back right away for quite some time because she's in a cold climate for a long time. And her magic is essentially kind of in hibernation or frozen or asleep or something. And it has to thaw out, so she has to be in a warm environment for a while. So it's not good. It's not good. Spell components. Let's see. If the problem with stamina is that it can't be precisely measured, then spell components sound like the perfect solution. They come in all different shapes and sizes. Herbs, pinch of sulfur, enchanted crystals, crack when used to fuel a spell. More sense for a character to say they've used half their etheric charge than half their stamina. Magical energy isn't real anyway, so readers will usually accept it can be measures like that without any fuss. And it's true that spell components work great up to a point. The point is much lower than authors often want to believe. Basically, the more components you have in the story, the more difficult it is for the audience to keep track of them. If the hero has 3 silver ribbons that they use to cast their transmutation spell, that's not so bad. If they also have half a dozen grasshopper legs for communing with insects and a score of gold coins to summon ghosts, you get the picture. That's a lot. That's a lot. I wouldn't be able to keep up with that either. The spell components become effectively infinite. The audience will feel like your characters can use magic whenever they want to, so you're back to the stamina problem again. Yeah. This can all be fine if the magic balance is balanced to be always on. Way of King's magic is powered by something called Stormlight, but this is used almost entirely for flavor rather than an actual limit. No one is keeping track of how many light-infused crystals Dalinar's armor still has, or whether Kaladin has breathed in a specific amount of Stormlight needed to do the next cool thing. Okay, so if you don't actually talk about it, then readers are going to question you. Is that what they're trying to say? Not knowing how to use a power. The hero is destined to learn a special power so potent and awe-inspiring that it will banish all evil for 1,000 years. That's very cool. But less great for constructing a plot. Not to worry though, you can just say that the hero doesn't know how to use their power yet. For maximum drama, they can figure it out and in the climax and win the day. Oh my gosh. I feel called out. Not called out. I feel like I've been talked about. It's the perfect strategy, assuming you don't plan to tell another story with this character or someone who has the same power. I call this the avatar state problem. In Last Airbender, Aang doesn't know how to use the avatar state. He masters it in the final battle, allowing him to win, but it would be repetitive to do the same thing again, so the sequel series has Korra mastered the avatar state in season 2, and the writers have no idea what to do. Okay. First, they portray the avatar state as much weaker when Korra uses it. Then she forgets about it for most of season 3, and then they give her some trauma that stops it from working in season 4. I can only assume that if we ever get another show or movie in this setting, the main character would be allergic to the avatar state. They have to come up with something, don't they? Becoming an unstoppable juggernaut of destruction sounds nice, but it makes them break out in hives. Juggernaut is kind of a fun word to say. This was all easily predictable from the moment Aang first went into the avatar state. It's even worse for writers who want the hero to master their power before the story is actually over. You have to be prepared for what happens after that, or this limit might as well not exist. So what do you want us to do with this type of thing? I think if the power, you don't know how to use it. I think if the power, like if, for example, this avatar state is like only certain people, only a few people in the world can exist having this. So if you, like, for example, if, like, they say Aang mastered the avatar state, and so they want Korra to also master the avatar state. But the problem is the energy that the avatar state uses in the world. Aang used so much of it that Korra's is weakened, so then maybe there's some tension between Korra and Aang. That might be an interesting thing, right? Maybe. I don't know if that's possible in this universe, but, you know, they could do that, right? Maybe. I don't know. Or if like, the avatar state is mastered, but then the type of avatar state, like, there's maybe different types of avatar state, and maybe there is one that is somehow more dangerous or delicate. So, like, every time Korra tries to use the avatar state, it actually breaks her somehow. I don't know. Just some ideas. I don't know if those would be helpful. I don't know if I don't really know how the Avatar. I just watched the movie, the live action movie that came out years and years ago, and that's the first time I heard about Avatar: The Last Airbender. Emotional blocks. Sometimes authors don't try to limit the measure itself, but rather the ways in which a character is willing to use it. Sure, the hero has a power that can completely demolish all enemies they encounter, but they're too nice and or traumatized to ever use it that way. Hold on, before we go on to emotional blocks, not knowing how to use a power is how my young adult portal fantasy novel Between Roses begins. The main character, Oren, doesn't know how to use her power. Everyone says that she has it. She can't feel it. There is no way for her to figure out how to project it. No one else knows how to use it, how it works, because it's never been done properly before. And so she's just stuck with, she knows that she has it because she does, things happen around her that shows that she has it. But she just doesn't know how to use it. And sometimes she thinks maybe she actually doesn't have it, or does she have it? And then when it becomes very clear that she does actually have it, she has to figure out how to use it. And she tries all kinds of things, but none of them work until it's not at the climax. It's before the climax. She does figure it out somewhat, but not completely. So it's a lot of figuring out, a lot of struggling. It's not that she would figure it out at the climax and win the day. That doesn't happen exactly there. Not exactly. It's a little more complicated than that, actually. It's a little more complicated. So emotional blocks, where were we? They're too nice or traumatized ever to use it that way. It's extremely risky because link between emotions and actions is even more subjective than a reader's stamina. You have to portray the character's psyche very well. You can end up in an argument with the audience as you add justifications after the fact. In the novel, Grace saying, "Oh my gosh, I have this book in my TBR." The protagonist doesn't let you use her godlike power to stop her evil uncle because she's been raised to think that she's a monster who must be restrained. But in other things, she uses her powers to found and operate a secret society of do-gooders completely against her uncle's wishes, which she really has beaten down as first claimed. Interesting. I'm going to be looking out for that when I read the book then. And just as a hero who hasn't figured out how to use their power, there's a question of what the story will do once the angsty hero gets over their emotional block. If you plan for that, they could be fine. If not, it won't go well. The emotional block. The emotional block. Do I have any characters that have an emotional block? I have characters where their emotion makes their magic go out of control. I can't think. Do I have? I like to use the emotion part as not limiting the character, but as to make the magic explode or do like weird things, dangerous things instead. Far off consequences. A final limit authors like to employ is the magic power is very useful in the short term. Its long-term effects are so detrimental as to give the character pause. Anime character Miroku, who has what's effectively a black hole in one hand. The more he uses it, the closer he gets to one day being consumed himself. A dangerous magic. A future dangerous magic. Do I have one like that? I'm not sure. This limit's first problem is basic believability. I'm not a psychologist, but it certainly doesn't seem like people are generally good at avoiding short-term gain because the long-term cost is too high. The average reader might be less cynical, but then you run into the second problem with far-off consequences. The short-term gain is often life or death. Whatever might happen in the future won't matter. The character dies from not using their power. The dynamic occurs with Miroku almost immediately, which is why it only takes a few episodes for every enemy he meets to be equipped with special wasps that hunt down his black hole through the power of magic babble. I'm not sure what all that is about. Even if the stakes aren't life or death, they have to be pretty high to generate tension. Don't get me wrong, I think long-term consequences for magic are potentially very cool and can lead to great drama. They just aren't a reliable way to limit magic in the short term. Long-term and short-term. I don't know if I have any of those. General limits. Establish a power ceiling. Think of the most powerful thing your major characters can reliably do with their magic. The greatest impact ever over the largest area or highest number of people. Don't worry about special circumstances or a 1 in a million shot. Focus on stuff they can do through supernatural muscle memory. Is that effect going to make the problems they face easily resolved? If so, the ceiling of magic is too high. You need to reduce the magical power. Okay, so you have to make sure they're not overpowered. Then you do this exercise. I see. Legend-born, the hero has no powers. She unlocks the power of King Arthur, not too shabby, but her enemies also have enhanced strengths. She is not in a position to walk all over them. She might gain ability to fly. The text is confusing, which is weird, but not especially powerful since her attacks are melee only. The power ceiling is right where it needs to be. Broken Earth can destroy buildings and people in a radius that's measured in miles. A number of her enemies are either individual humans with no magic or armies of humans with no magic. The hero could easily defeat such opponents, so the plot employs a number of contrivances to stop her from doing so. The ceiling is way too high. So they're saying this character in Broken Earth is too overpowered? I actually don't have any overpowered characters. Just don't make them, I guess. You can run the same exact exercise with other characters. Villains should be stronger than the hero, but not so strong that they get whatever they're after just by wishing for it. Alright. I don't think I have anything that is too overpowered. I'd like to make magic be a little more like on the, not really like realistic, because magic isn't realistic, but more on the realistic side, if you know what I mean. Limit the effect of downtime. Oh yeah, I talked about downtime. That's the thing about the stamina? Many magic systems following too from what happens in short, high-tension conflicts. Such scenes, the characters are almost always under intense time pressure, so they can only do so much in a fight. Your hero's ability to instantly freeze water is useful, but hardly overpowered even against non-magical foes, unless the power extends to water inside other creatures, and at that point you're just creating your own problems. It's important to remember that characters won't always be in short, high-tension conflicts. They still have their magic during these periods. That's where a lot of stories trip up. While that water freezing magic isn't overpowered in the moment, it could become story-breaking during downtime if this is a setting without ready access to refrigeration. Ice sells for a premium in such locations and your hero has an endless supply. Is that a problem for the story? It is if the plot depends on a hero with limited resources. So like a limited... At the low end of things, it means something the character can easily sell for money. Interesting. I suppose I'm glad that I made most of my magic being like energy, like a muscle. Because then I don't run into problems like this in which there is downtime that they won't use it as such. However, like for Cyper that I talked about, his race sorcerers, they use magic in their daily lives. So they have very practical things they use their magic for to keep their muscle energy up, muscle up. They don't always use it, okay? So there are locks that you can lock onto doors. Like you can lock your door, you can lock your window, and some sorcerers create their own lock. It's called lock magic. They can create their own lock sort of magic spell. It's a specific set of runes that they create themselves, so it's unique to the individual. It's kind of like a password, I suppose. And they use that to lock their doors or, I don't know, their cars or whatever they have. So, so it's a practical, very, very practical use of magic. I wanted these people, magical people, like if they can use magic, they're going to use it in their everyday lives. But there's going to be some limits to what they can specifically do with it. Like they can't just create clothes with magic. They have cloth and they can use magic to like make the cloth sparkly. But they can't like sew clothes with magic. They have to do that, actually do that by hand or by machine or whatever. So there are some things that they can't do with magic. So even in the sort of, you know, downtime, everyday life type of situations, they are using their magic to, you know, have jobs, make money. And sometimes they might use it for fighting, but very rarely. So that's what I have. Distance. Magic can present a problem with distance. Favorite tropes involves mages scrying on their enemies from afar, or casting curses without ever leaving the safety of their tower. Interesting. You're dealing with something that looks more like modern drone warfare than traditional fantasy, with mages splitting their time between breaking through the other side's countermeasures and keeping their own intact. From far away. None of my magic systems have characters fighting from far away. Everyone has to be up close and personal. Yeah, I don't have any of that. Anyway, we're moving on. I want to be here for too long, right? Balance attack and defense. The problem with the human body is that it's pretty fragile unless you're writing something with low realism. No matter what D&D tells you, no one is surviving a fireball or lightning bolt to the face. Before long, you're in a situation similar to the previous, if whoever casts first wins by default. You don't want defenses to get too powerful either. When that happens, it's in everyone's best interest to huddle in their turtle shells, doing nothing wrong. No one wants that. The best option is to create a system of active defense. This allows you to create mobile and ever-shifting battles where both sides need to make split-second decisions. That's much more fun than waiting around to see if the blasting spell or shooting spell run out of magic points first. Interesting. A simpler option is to require a successful conventional attack before using such powers. If a mage wants to use mind control spells, they might first have to get a grip on their enemy, which leaves a lot more room for countermeasures. I don't have mind control type of spells in my stories. It feels too overpowered for me. Mind control spells. I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like mind control spells are kind of overpowered. Like an overpowered magic type of thing. I mean, if you control the other person, then that's kind of a win, isn't it? Easy win. Magic battles in my stories, usually they are up close and personal. They have to face each other. And sorcerers, they heal. The older the sorcerer, the easier they heal. So sorcerers don't die easily in fights. They can. They don't. Not easily, at least. The way a magic battle between two sorcerers work is if one sorcerer is hindered to such an extent that they cannot counter the hindrance at all. So they're like unable to move. So that is like how magic battles work for sorcerers. And if a magic battle was between like two elemental magics, like fire and water, for example, do I have one of those? I don't know if I do. I do have a magic battle between light magic and shadow magic. But the interesting thing about those two people is that they're actually twins, and so it's light and shadow, and so they're actually equal in their skill and magical strength. So even if they battle, neither will win. It'll always be a draw. But they have to do it like, face to face. I don't have anyone doing attacks from afar. There's no one being attacked or controlled from afar. I don't have that. I don't think. Anyway. If you're interested in any of these stories I'm talking about, Lone Gold Daring Purple is on Wattpad. That's the one I'm talking about with all the sorcerers, if you want to read that. And the other one I'm talking about with the light and shadow magic, it's not up on Wattpad yet. It's called The Rat Girl, and it'll be up, I don't know, maybe sometime this year or next year. Maintain uncertainty. The last approach is broad by necessity, looking at anything in magic system that limits the uncertainty. Certainty is a prerequisite for tension. Without it, your story will flounder. If stories about winning a dance contest don't give your hero power, it specifically makes them the best dancer in the world. Powers that allow them to dance better are fine as long as their opponents are similarly furnished, but if their power is to simply be the best, it doesn't matter how stiff the competition is. The loss of uncertainty is a little more subtle. Flight spells aren't inherently overpowered, but they will be if your story is about the difficulties of traveling long distances on foot. Do you want ego discourse? Because this is how you get ego discourse. I don't know where that is linking to. Finally, we have magic that eliminates uncertainties. Anti-lying magic is a common one. A huge number of stories derive tension from the possibility that the character is lying, and removing that possibility means the only source of uncertainty is social interactions is a misunderstanding. Various types of super smarts also fall under this category. Intelligence is such a nebulous concept that magical enhancements to it almost always manifest as a character being able to predict what will happen next, but stories stop working if we know what will happen next. Not knowing what happens next is the whole point. Future side. Okay, so I have a character called Richard. He's an immortal assassin. The story is called Alive at Dawn. You can actually find it on Ream. I don't particularly advertise that one yet because I don't have much on there at the moment, but this is a gothic fiction story, and Richard has the power to see the future. But the limit is that he can only see it in short glimpses, and it's only when he is involved in it. But if someone that he becomes involved with changes, the future changes. Like it's seconds. The future will change in seconds. So he's limited in that way. He can only get little glimpses of the future. So it's not like a whole big sequence, just like maybe a hint of a letter being passed from one hand to the next, and on it he can see his name and the name of his nemesis, and he's like, what is that? But I don't even know who this person is and what is going on, and he has to wait and see. He also sees glimpses of him being involved with with certain people, so he goes to look for those people, tries to find out their names and everything. So he is very limited in his magic. And this is thanks to the demon who lives in his shadow. The demon's name is Charcoal, and he keeps the information from Richard. He is able to see the entire future because he's the demon with those powers. But he only gives Richard a little bit of it. Because in his mind, well, what's the fun in being attached to this human if he doesn't at least limit some of the powers? Adding specific limits. Oh, what are we talking about? Okay, so detailed and specific drawbacks to put on your marriage. There are as many of those as there are potential merits, but we can still talk about a few that are broadly applicable. Limit the number of uses. Stories that employ fatigue or spell components in the magic system, trying to limit how many times characters can use their abilities, but tautological as it may sound, the only way to do that is by actually limiting how many times a character can use their ability. Instead of saying that a spell uses components or makes the caster tired, figure out how many times you want the ability to be usable and then work backwards. Your hero can only use their lightning magic twice before they're too exhausted to stand, or they can only summon a Fey Hound 3 times because each time they do, one of their 3 glass puppy figurines shatters. That's very specific. The key is for these limits to be tangible. The number of uses should also be on the low side, since very few stories will feature enough magical confrontations for a hero to get 25 castings of Fireball. What if your hero hits the limit but you still want them to use their power? That's possible, but you need to create specific conflict with its own turning point. Even with a perfect execution, don't do this often. It happens more than once or twice in even a long story. Your audience will get the impression that limits don't actually matter. Give your character limits. So I didn't really specifically figure out exactly. So I talked about Cyper, right? I didn't figure out exactly how many times like he can teleport before that he's too exhausted. I did make it 3 times. I don't specifically say that. But after that, after he uses it to his limit, magic after that becomes incredibly difficult for him for quite some time. like, because he feels like a little bit recharged, so he uses it some more, but then he's even more tired. Then he thinks he's recharged a little bit more, and then he's even more. So he's never at full capacity until like towards the end of the story, when he fully develops his magic. But yeah, so he's pretty hindered for most of the story because he uses too much of it at some point when he's trying to escape. So I don't know. I didn't particularly like give him a limit or anything. I don't really go there. But I do make it clear that there is some kind of a limit. And I also make it clear that sorcerers don't always use their magic because it isn't energy, and it will make them tired if they use certain complex spells. Can be tiring if they use certain types of magic. So they do tend to like do things in other ways. Like they don't use their teleportation magic. They actually have things that they ride on to fly around in, actual vehicles to fly around on, instead of using teleportation. So they would rather do that than use their magic, because their magic has a limit, and they don't want to be tired unless they have to use their magic for battle. I need a drink of water. Anyway, increase the casting time. In most cases, stories don't keep track of time strictly enough for a longer casting to matter, but fight scenes are an exception. In these 10 sequences, even seconds matter. So if a character has some powerful ability you don't want them constantly spamming, make it take longer to use. Okay, so if like a spell takes a long time to cast. Interesting. I don't have anything like that, because it's just an energy that you just like, you just bursts out of you. I do have types of magic that are a little more complicated, like the sorcerer magic. Some of it is more complicated, and they can't be said with a shortened runic spell bumbled. The runes must be individually created and then combined and then cast, so it takes a long time for some of it, but they don't use that type of magic a lot anyway. Only like at times when, I don't know, it's a protection spell or something, and you don't need to do it right away because you do it beforehand. Like, you don't do it during a battle. I don't know about having a spell that takes weeks to cast. I don't have any type of magic that does that kind of thing. Introduce vulnerabilities. This is an option for limiting magic that I find to be underused, even though it has a lot of potential. Basically, while the characters gain the benefit of their power, they also get weaker in other areas. Classic example was astral projection. Character travels through walls and get all kinds of information, but they have to leave their body behind, helpless if anyone hostile comes along. If one of your characters is a healer, you don't want them to go around healing everyone willy-nilly. I almost read that backwards. Maybe using their powers weakens their immune system, so they almost always get sick afterwards. That could be okay if the character is safe in town with plenty of space to recover, but used rigidly out in the wilderness. Maybe you have a character with oracle powers, but just seeing the future would ruin suspense. So to get Avengers, they must navigate a spooky dreamscape. Okay, so some kind of magic that they have some kind of magic, but then in order to get it to work, there's some kind of consequence, some kind of negative effect onto them. Do I have anyone like that? I'm not sure, actually. Actually, I am not sure I have that kind of thing, because I have other limits. Oh, actually, I do have a world where magic, like there is this creature, there are these humans that can turn into animals, certain animals. So there's this one human that can turn into a firebird, basically a phoenix. But every time they use fire magic, it actually burns them in the inside, so then they have to be healed later on. And if they use too much, they can actually die. But since they're a phoenix, they can actually revive themselves, but they have to do that within 3 seconds, 4 seconds. So they have to do it right away, otherwise it won't work. So they have to do it while they still have their consciousness, like while that's still alive. I think it was like 3-4 seconds. It might have been 10 seconds or more, but it was like not very long. So while they are still conscious, they have to revive themselves. But if they are able to do that, they do just die. So they are risking their lives literally when they use their magic. So they typically don't use their magic, or they only use a little bit of it, but it does affect them in the inside. And also the characters, the ones that can use water magic, they can actually drown in their own magic. So using the water magic sort of increases their water levels inside their body, and so they can drown from like the inside out. Very disturbing when you think about it. So I have some things like that. Set specific times and locations. Let's see. Magic is something we bring with us wherever we go. Makes it difficult to limit when and where characters use their magics, but it need not be. So, okay, interesting. Characters get their powers from something in the environment. You can make them more or less powerful at appropriate times. This is especially useful for the trope in which characters go out to fight monsters but are dingy and dejected when they return to town. Perhaps these adventurers draw power from the same miasma that creates monsters in the first place, so they're just normal people when they reach an elevated village with clear air. Interesting. I have actually the sorcerers in Lone Gold Daring Purple. They live in a part of the world where the air and the magic is most dense, so it makes them feel more powerful magically than if they lived in anywhere else in the world. So when they go to some place else in the world, their sort of magic becomes sort of dim. They don't have a lot of power as they usually would if they were in their own part of the world. I have a story where a sorcerer who was living a long time outside of that part of the world goes back to the source of power world and just feels just so much more powerful, and just his shoulders feel lighter and he just feels more energized, and he has like he feels a little more like happy and energetic and just whoopee kind of thing for the first time in a long time. And that's when it's sort of explained to the protagonist, who has no idea about that stuff, saying, well, you know, actually the magic is pretty dense here, so that's why I feel this way, kind of thing. So I have that. So it's kind of like it's specific location, wouldn't you say? Time limit. Using time limit is trickier, as it's a big task for your readers to keep close track of what hour of the day the story is in. Yeah, that is definitely hard to keep track. I've come upon stories where it's like, I get a paragraph where it's like, and they had dinner. It's like, wait, it's nighttime? I didn't know it was nighttime. They didn't say it was nighttime. Did I miss that? And I go back pages and I don't see it. Like, what? Usually you want to focus on longer stretches of time like morning or evening rather than 2 or 3 o'clock. I found this one works best as a way to give characters a variety of powers without piling up too many at once. They might have control over shadows during the day, with their light-based powers appear at night for a cool bit of contrast, or the type of magic they can use might change with the seasons. Interesting. I don't have anything like that, but that's interesting. Create diminishing returns. Last option is very useful for those non-combat powers with permanent effects. That includes healing, transmutation, and enlarging house pets until they're the size of elephants. You know, all the classics. The simplest limitation on such powers is to give their effects a time limit, but that might be too extreme. Maybe you want a character who can permanently change the world around them, but you don't want it to get out of hand. Interesting. The hero can enchant a sword with the power to cut through anything, but if they want to enchant a second sword, then both of them will only be moderately sharper than normal. Interesting. I don't know how that would, why they would do that, but okay. The villain can heal any wounds their lieutenant receives, but if they also heal other minions, all the healed wounds are more likely to reopen. Interesting limitation. Interesting limitation for healing. Interesting. Sometimes I wonder if I made my sorcerers overpowered by making the magic have natural healing abilities. It's not healing magic. It's just magic has this natural healing ability that they instantly heal when you have this magic. But I suppose, I don't know, actually. Anyway, let's see. If your character create demon-proof circles in a story about fighting demons, you likely want to make sure they can only have so many of those circles around at the same time, no matter how long they work at it. If your character can turn glass into precious gems, your main concern is probably making sure they aren't a wealthy gem tycoon. In this case, the gems might crumble if they make more than 2 or 3 a year, or they can have artisanal gem business without becoming wealthy enough to buy a kingdom. Okay. Anyway, that looks like the end of the article. Okay. Well, that was interesting. Thinking about the magic system and everything like that. I kind of glossed over some of them, but I'll put the article in the description so you can read it if you're interested for further reading. I think it was pretty interesting. Thinking about my own magic system, there's some things I didn't think about too. Not that I'm going to particularly changing anything for current stories, but maybe future stories, who knows. Yeah, there's all kinds of things you can do with magic systems. I thought this diminishing returns, create diminishing returns thing is very interesting because I don't think I have anyone that has something like this. You know, I have a lot of elemental magic instead of magic that creates things. I don't have a lot of magic that creates things. It creates magic. It doesn't create, like, things. I don't know why I like elemental magic so much. I have so much of it. Maybe I need to make some magic system where it's all about creating things. I don't know. I'm not particularly interested in it, to be honest, to make. Well, that was the end of the article. That was the end. Anyway, let me know what you all thought about this article, and if you have anything to add, anything to say, anything to agree, anything to disagree with, any thoughts on my magic system, what I talked about, you can go to Wattpad. I'm pretty sure I have Wattpad linked on my YouTube profile thingy. You can find it there. You can read Lone Gold Daring Purple and find out more about sorcerers and stuff like that. And sometime soon I will post the Rat Girl to the to Wattpad, but I had to edit it first, so it's gonna be a while. And meanwhile, I'm also trying to edit my young adult portal fantasy novel, Between Roses, the one I talked about where main character Oren does have a power, but she doesn't know how to use it at all, and nobody else knows how to use it. And so she's trying to figure out what it is, and she tries all kinds of things, but nothing really works until she figures out exactly what it is. Very exciting. The book is coming out this fall, by the way, in case you want to check that out. Ebook, that is, paperback down the line. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the article. What else do I have to say? Hope you have a lovely day, and you will hear me in the next video. And that's it. interesting, very, very interesting article. Thank you, not a Russian bot, NARBY from Wacky Writers. The fox is out.